It is 6 o'clock, April 1st. There is no April Fool's introduction today or anything planned for that. This is the April welcome gathering for the California Working Families Party. Thank you, everybody who has joined us right at the top of the hour. And a shout out to Akshams for the early introduction before we even got started. Great to see folks hopping on early. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Aiden Rodriguez-Swanson. I am the statewide organizer for the California Working Families Party. I am based in the Bay Area, the South Bay to be specific. I run basically all of our YouTube events, anything that has to do with statewide. We'll get into other stuff later on what I work on and focus on, but I am the familiar face. If you have seen me and attended the welcome gathering before, if this is your very first, welcome. It's always great to see new folks hopping in and joining us today. It is 6:01. I have given folks a minute to hop on if they are timely. Again, if folks want to introduce themselves in the chat, you are more than welcome to. You do not have to, of course. This is just an opportunity to get to know one another. No obligation to do so whatsoever. But if you have questions about anything, feel free to drop them in the chat. I will answer anything that I can, and if I can't, I'll make sure you get everything that you need so you can get that answered squared away. Basically, where you're joining us from or anything that's on top of mind, you can drop it in the chat. I'm not sure if I still left it on a subscriber mode only. Probably should double check that beforehand, but everyone should be able to comment or anything in the chat. Welcome from San Diego. Okay, it is subscriber mode only. Thank you. Let me see if I can change that really quickly. Can't change it right now, but hopefully folks are able to chat whenever. But thank you for pointing that out, and welcome from San Diego. Hopefully the weather is nice. I've heard it's been kind of rainy and overcast down in SoCal recently. But without further ado, let's jump into what we have planned for this evening. This is a welcome gathering, so this is a space if you are new to WFP, if you're just like always attending these, this is a space for everybody. So I think the big three things that I wanted to get people, before we get started, is these three things here. I like to have this as the front for basically everything. Take space and make space. So if this is a space for everybody. So if you are someone who is kind of shy, who doesn't normally talk in settings like this, I really encourage you to just come out and take space, introduce yourself, say hi, drop comments, drop questions. This is a space for everybody. And then conversely, make space. If you are someone who always is in the chat, if I've seen you fairly often, maybe make space for other folks in the chat. Again, if you do want to say whatever in the chat, you're more than welcome to, but just be cognizant of that throughout this evening. What happens here stays here, and what is learned here leaves here. Any interactions that you have with one another or myself and everything, what happens here, let's just keep it here to this space now. I know this is on YouTube, but what you can take with you later on is basically what you learned from this. Maybe from one another, maybe from myself, from the slides, anything like that. And last but not least, speak from your own experience using I statements. So say, oh, I think X, Y, and Z, rather than making blanket statements and generalizations that might not take into consideration everyone's point of view. If that sounds good with everybody, I would just say do a thumbs up, do an emote react, whatever you need to do, just so I know that you have agreed to these. If there are others you think that would be beneficial for all of us to look into and to like say, hey, can we all agree on X, Y, and Z? Feel free to drop in the chat. Most folks are pretty fine with these three. So without further ado, though, thank you for the reacts. If this would load. So the welcome gathering is an introduction to WFP as a whole of like, okay, why do we exist? And basically a core part of this is our theory of change and why we exist as a political party. Folks sometimes have questions around like, oh, why a party? Why not some other kind of entity? Why not a PAC? Why not whatever? And we'll get into what makes WFP and why we chose to be a political party. And if I say anything that is confusing, if I use an acronym that doesn't make sense, or I just glossed over, feel free to just drop in the chat, hey, what did this mean? Happy to take a break and answer questions if they come up. So you're not interrupting me at any point. This information is for you all. I just want to make sure that you have access to it, and that is through making sure you understand it all. So basically, as political party, this is what we defined as our North Star, basically what we are aiming toward. And I think it's just best reading it out loud to kind of make sense here. So our North Star is to build a multiracial, feminist working people's political party of the American left that wins governing power to enact a structural reform agenda to save the planet and all the people on it. Now, there are a couple of things I always like to highlight with this. One, it really shows who we are trying to build a coalition of, and the ideologies around that. The second piece is the goal in mind is not like, oh, I want to get to this. I want us to have this kind of language that we use all the time. The main goal that we focus on is governing power. And governing power is something that, especially on the left, sometimes we have like a hesitancy with governing power. It's like, oh, this is something that corrupts people. Power corrupts. The government is unable to meet the needs of the people. Yes, that is true in the current system and setting that we exist in. Like, we have to acknowledge the current flaws of a system and then also move towards a system that works for us and all of us. So doing so is part of this coalition. We need to build this coalition to get then to the governing power piece. One thing I do want to mention with this is folks kind of think about a political party. A political party isn't just the end-all be-all to make change. A political party is one avenue to make change. Like mass grassroots movements is another avenue to make change. And the two, sometimes they interact and intersect, and sometimes they have their own paths. So I would say that is an important thing to keep in mind. This isn't, again, when I talk about this work, I'm not saying that, hey, this is the only way to make change. This is the way that we are tackling things at this time. Hope that makes sense for folks. But this basically is the North Star and a kind of guiding force as WFP. So this kind of came out of what we saw as the main struggles in the United States. And I know this is the California Working Families Party, but largely the struggles that we see are universal in their presence across every state. So the big four that we see are the authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the GOP. Pretty self-explanatory in the last couple, close to like a decade now, of like where we're seeing a shift in their blatant stances on things. The next piece on the flip side of the party aisle is the Democratic Party being controlled by wealthy and corporate forces. So not only are the authoritarians taking over, the authoritarian white nationalists taking over the GOP, the Democratic Party has been taken more control over wealthy and corporate forces. And a symptom of this is that Democrats are losing working class people of all races. And for the longest time, we would hear folks say about, oh, they're losing white voters and white male voters. That used to be the trend, but now the trend is shifting more towards working class people of all races. So this is no longer just siloed out into one demographic. And last but not least, if it wasn't clear enough for now, the two-party system limits our room to maneuver. And I'll cover what that means specifically for us in a second here. So first and foremost, the authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the GOP. GOP means Republican Party. I realize I probably should clarify that a little bit. GOP actually stands for Grand Old Party. We don't have to get into a history lesson here. But basically, the authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the Republican Party, it's moved from just the party of Donald Trump to a party of white nationalism, Christian fascism, Christian theocracy. It poses a clear and present danger to marginalized communities and worldwide, essentially, basically at every level, where they target folks who they deem as scapegoats for their perceived issues in the world. I normally ask folks like, oh, where do you see this show up? I mean, we're in California. Sometimes folks in different areas, this shows up in different ways. I think one of the big things that we see sometimes is in the Central Valley or in the general fishhook, and I'll explain what that looks like in a second, of, okay, there's Orange County, there's the Inland Empire, there's the Central Valley. All of these are areas that are showing still pockets of the white nationalist and white nationalism. Next, the corporate and wealthy control of Democratic Party. When it comes to the Democratic Party, they, for the most part, are pretty good at the defending basic rights aspect of things, the social issues piece, but at the same time, they normalize the status quo. And what that looks like is maintaining an electoral system that heavily works to support folks who are not necessarily working class. And then when they elect folks who end up being in favor of the current economic and tax system, which again benefits the ultra rich and the wealthy corporations, not the individuals that really make this country go or the working class. Why is this a problem? It basically leads to working class individuals not having a say in either of the political parties, especially if you are not ideologically aligned with like the Republican Party, or if you are not in the economic zone, I would say, of where the Democratic Party currently lives. And then with those two being the two options, the two-party system limits our room to maneuver in this space. This basically looks like, let me see if this loads up, these three things. Sometimes when people think of third parties, they think of, oh, you are running as a spoiler to allow a Republican or a conservative or like the worst of the candidates to win office. It really limits us to folks thinking about strategic voting. Again, folks have to choose between the better of two evils kind of talk. And then it also forces campaigns and candidates to focus a lot on swing voters. Swing voters being the individuals who typically are older, more affluent, and white. And so you, again, are overlooking the working class of folks who have a million other things going on in their lives where elections is not top of mind for them because the system doesn't allow them to basically breathe. And so the Democrats losing working class people of all races. How do we see this happen? And this basically looks like when individuals just get apathetic to the electoral process. They see elections, they see the electoral work, and they're like, nah, this isn't for me. Folks don't listen to what I have to say. They don't listen to my struggles. We see this as folks who were former Obama voters flipping over to then support Donald Trump, largely for economic issues. And then the larger context around it of like, oh, who do they blame for these economic issues? Normally, they don't look up at the corporations and the wealthy who are to blame for these things. They typically look down upon the folks that they see as a threat to their economic livelihood. So that is folks in cities, the immigrant populations. And so we see this show up in different ways throughout the country. And one thing I do wanted to show is that this is something that was fairly recent. I think within the last month I saw this. This really goes to show this change that we're seeing. So for folks who have trouble kind of deciphering this, it's essentially showing the poorest third represented by the blue line, the richest third of folks represented by the red line, and where they are in relation to supporting Democrats versus Republicans. So Democratic Party for the longest time through the 80s, 90s, and building up from the 60s, 70s, had a strong support of the poorest third of Americans. And then we see around 2008. What happened in 2008? Who knows? But we see around that time that there was a shift in where folks started seeing their allegiances kind of live in terms of who they favor. And so the poorest third are now almost and are on trajectory to flip with the richest third in which party they are likely to favor. And again, this is not just this is just because of Donald Trump. This predates Donald Trump. This is actually a issue that is larger than just, oh, there was a bad person in office, we're flipping things now. This is a longer trend that we are seeing. So again, when people think of a third party, they think of this. You think, okay, the Democrats, you got the Republicans, and you got the spoiler party. However, that's not necessarily how we see and define a political party. A political party is these four things. First being people organizing together around to do elections, around a platform, and then governed by a clear ideology. So these four things are how we define and see a political party. Again, every single time I say this, Maurice Mitchell is our executive director on the national level of WFP. I'm probably gonna get a video of this next time so I can play this for folks, because he just does such a better job at putting this into words than I ever could, and even just reading this aloud won't do it justice, but I'll read it aloud for folks here. In order to build the world we need, we have to dismantle racism and sexism. We need to build an economy that puts people and the planet ahead of profit. To accomplish any of this, we need a political revolution that will transform our government by taking power from the billionaires and warmongers and putting it in the hands of the majority of Americans. Again, this is basically a rephrasing of our North Star, but it shows to everybody like our consistency with this. It's not like, oh, this is our North Star, let's put a sign up for it. We really embrace this. This is not just like, oh, this is a nice thing to say, some focus group came up with this. This is after a lot of conversations, we came to this understanding that this was the best way to go about things, and this is the goal that we should keep in mind. So where does this actually end up being for California? And I kind of mentioned this fishhook analogy earlier, but on the slide here, you'll see the 2020 general election. You see Biden versus Trump. Again, California goes blue. For the presidential elections, no big surprise there. However, that same election, we had basically a Prop 13 reform on the ballot for rent control stuff, and this is the same results. Like, these are the results that same election cycle. We see that despite the presidential ticket at the top of the ticket being blue, it ended up being very red for everything kind of down ballot from there. So the right typically maintains the stronghold of the Central Valley, Inland Empire, I would add Orange County, and then parts of San Diego. This really goes to shift how people think about California sometimes, because it's not just like, oh, we're blue. There's a lot of work to do underneath just a top of the ticket thing. So while the large scale stuff, like, oh, it's safe blue. It's safe blue for the folks that are at the very top. For everyone else outside of these blue areas for Prop 15, it's still a continuous fight for this. And that's where we came in as California WFP. So we are a massive state. I always have to remind this to folks because some other states of WFP, they're a lot smaller in scale. They get to focus on things. We are a massive, massive state. So we decided that, okay, it would be best to break up California into a bunch of different regions. I'll get that to a second. But at the very top of WFP in California, we have our statewide governing body, which is our steering committee. And this is made up of 3 pillars, each with a third of the power to vote on stuff at that level. So we have statewide labor unions, we have statewide communities groups, or C4s, and then we have member reps, leaders from the regional charters. And again, as I mentioned, we are too big a state to have a statewide steering committee make all the decisions at every level. So we broke up California into these 7 regional charters. We have the Bay Area, Central Coast, Central Valley, LA, Orange County, Inland Empire, and San Diego. So each of these 7 also have their own steering committees. And so this might be the folks that these are likely the folks that you are going to interact with on your own on a member level, because this is where you are represented on the regional steering committees. So these regional charters or regional steering committees are made up of labor unions in those areas, community C4s, and individual members who are represented by a member rep. So individual members are folks who pay dues to California WFP, whether it's $1 a month or $10 a month, whatever it is, whatever you can give. You then become an individual member, and you have the opportunity to become a member rep. And a member rep is someone who gets to sit on these regional charters. We are having elections for this in June. So if this is something you're interested in, please make sure to check in with your organizer. I'll make sure to show who is different organizers for each region. But this is an opportunity for folks who want to get engaged with the endorsement process, with stuff that we talk about in the steering committees, bring things up. The possibilities are largely endless in the things that you can do with the steering committee and getting stuff funded and passed. Again, if I'm going too fast for anyone or folks have questions, again, feel free to stop me, ask questions in the chat. Happy to answer things for folks. So I'm not going to leave this up too long because it lists everything out, but these are all who we are made up of on the statewide level and then on the regional local organization level. So you can see folks like SEAU 10-1, Project Superbloom, ACE, Courage, California, statewide organizations. And then in different areas, we have the Dolores Huerta Action Fund, we have ACE on smaller levels, United, COCO in LA, People Power, Power CA, a lot of folks doing a lot of different things, all at different levels. And so, again, when folks think of WFP, it's not just the staff. It's not just me sitting here working on staff stuff. It is made up of all of these groups and all of these individuals working together to make this change. So we are not just a small party. In that sense, we are built up of the larger coalition. So last year, as we were kind of thinking about this upcoming election year in 2024, we had a couple of things in mind of where we wanted to build out as WFP. And this, again, is in the electoral context. This is not covering everything. These are just some of the main directions that we were thinking of. The first being to expand our state legislature squad in about 4 to 5 key races, and so upgrade them from more like of a moderate or a lib to a WFP champion. So 3 of these hopefully in the Senate and 2 of them in the Assembly. If those words are new to you, I will explain that in the next couple of slides here. But we really wanted to focus on building out this squad that we have in California. The second piece that we wanted to focus on was there are races smaller than the state legislature. So how can we focus on supporting folks who want to run for office down the line, want to run for higher office, just want to run for office on their school board district or their city council, anything like that. We want to support them. So I'll go into how exactly we're going to be supporting them in a couple of slides here. But we really wanted to focus on supporting anyone who is going to think of running for office and running in alignment with WFP. And then the last piece to this is work with the federal team to take back a couple of congressional swing seats in California. And at the same time, hopefully expand the amount of progressives we have in Congress. So it's not just, okay, we have to get a blue and a red seat. We would hopefully get I like to say purple or an orange, depending on which color of WFP you want to align with, into Congress as well from California. As I mentioned before about the Assembly and the Senate, there's a lot of things going on here on this slide. But to basically sum this up for folks, this is how the breakdown exists of the folks in the Assembly. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, California legislature has the Assembly, which is basically our House of Representatives, and we have a Senate, which is, again, the equivalent to the Congressional Senate. It is, again, they have a Speaker of the House. you can see the buckets of folks that we have here. So there are about 28 corporate Dems, with 4 of their seats opening up this year. There's 10 liberals, 2 opening up at 24, and then 24 progressives, 7 open and 24. There are 80 seats total. No one's going to have to do math or anything, so it's completely fine. But there are 80 seats total. 62 of them are Dems, so we have a majority. We actually have a supermajority, so we're pretty clear in terms of the Democrats having control of the legislature. However, we need 41 votes to have a majority. And with the math right now, we have 24 progressives and 10 liberals. That only gets us to about 34 good votes in our favor without us having to pick at the corporate Dems with 28 right there. So even though we have 34, and that's a good amount of folks, we are still a little bit away from having the amount of votes that we need to actually pass the legislation that we want. And so these folks here listed are the 24 who fall into that largely progressive bucket. One thing I want to make clear is not all of these are progressive by the typical standards. They just kind of fall in line with that a lot more. The ones highlighted in purple, as it shows here, are the ones that we see as that have been endorsed by WFP already. The green ones have the open seats, and the black ones are just, again, just largely progressive there. We still have more votes to get there. This is what the assembly looks like. Hopefully by the time we have this next, what would it be? Next December, like this coming December, these numbers look better and more in our favor. So keep this in mind if you're joining us in December to see what upgrades we have made by then. And then the Senate is a lot harder of a battle to face. We only have 10 progressives in the larger sense there, with 4 liberal Dems. There are 40 seats total, 32 of them are Dems, 27 votes needed for the supermajority, 21 only needed for a majority. We are sitting at 14 in our large kind of umbrella camp, with 18 corporate Dems and then 8 Republicans as well. Those seats, again, if you were thinking like, okay, how can we take some of those Republican seats? Those are a lot harder to take. Not that they're impossible to take, but the numbers in terms of party registration are a lot harder to flip. So that's something that just keep in mind there. However, with these 18 corporate Dems, you can see that there is a huge amount of opening this cycle. We have 8 open this time, which can allow us to take from the corporate Dems, flip them over to our side. And the ones again here in purple are the ones that we have endorsed and that are what we would consider WFP electeds. If folks have questions about anything, please feel free to let me know. But that's basically how the assembly looks. This is how the state senate looks. So this is basically one of the focuses that I mentioned earlier about how we wanted to grow out our squad in the state legislature. These folks here listed on the left are our current squad members. We have Aisha Wahab, Carolyn Menjivar, Lola Smallwood Cuevas, Eloise Gomez Reyes, Liz Ortega, Alex Lee, Ash Cholera, Isaac Bryan, Corey Jackson, and Tina McKinnon. These are the folks here listed on the left. And then on the right side, in terms of growing our squad, these two, Sasha Renee Perez and Shadeh El-Hawari, both made it out of the primary and are moving on to the general election. So hopefully we see these two join our ranks in after November when they hopefully win. And there will be more that we will endorse after they made it to the primary. So be sure to keep an eye out for anything that we have going on there, because all of the screenings that we do for candidates and races are open to everybody. So you don't have to be a newspaper member, you don't have to be a member. This could be the first time you ever interact with us. But the screenings and everything that we have are available to everybody who want to join. They will be held virtually for the most part. We might do a couple of in-person ones down the line. But for the most part, anyone can attend these, ask questions, basically see how we interview these candidates, because we wanted to make this accessible for everybody. And not everyone gets the chance to really be a part of the process of interviewing potential candidates for a state legislature. So if that's something you're interested in, please be sure to keep an eye out for Mobilize. Everything should exist there. So another thing I wanted to talk about, and I mentioned this earlier with the how we're supporting folks on the smaller progressive levels of school boards, city council seats, board of supervisors, water district seats, whatever. We are doing our campaign camp again here in California. I know National has their own campaign camp. We are doing our own thing where we are focusing on doing sessions in person and having those supplemented by virtual sessions. And if you can't attend the in-person ones, you should be able to attend any of the virtual ones that the recordings will be made available to you. The link should show up in the chat for folks. There it is. The application is live for anybody who wants to use it. So if you are interested in running for office, feel free to click that link. If you want to share it with someone you know, feel free to do that. This is, again, available for everybody who is interested in this. You do not just have to be a candidate running for office. You don't have to announce already. You can be a potential staffer. You could just be someone interested in learning more about campaign camp. All of these things, and again, I think one thing I should probably note, all of this is free. There's no cost associated with this. This is not one of those things where like, oh, you have to spend $1,000 to get all the training you need. All of this is stuff from folks that myself and our national staff and our folks in our team put together for folks that you can take all this information after training, have access to it, and do whatever you want with it. You can run for office, you can help out a campaign, you can just have this information available to you. We like to make this information accessible for everybody. So if there's anything that you want to see part of this, feel free to reach out to me. It mostly focuses on a lot of the field stuff, so calculating your win number, your turnout goals, communications, messaging, fundraising, endorsement questionnaires, digital stuff, graphic design. All of this is free and available for folks. All you have to do is submit the application, and we'll get in touch with you. Our big kickoff for this is going to be in 4 weeks from today, on April 29th. That event's already up on Mobilize if you're interested in attending that. But the main thing I would urge folks to do is to click on the application link that is in the chat. As I mentioned before, I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but like, we don't just support campaigns and candidates just in election season. That is what we focus on, but it's not the sole thing that we do. One of the things that we do is fight back recalls that we are seeing targeting a lot of our progressive champions. One of the first actual people that we endorsed in California as WFP is Jessie Lopez in the city of Santa Ana in Orange County. She was basically a sole vote against the Police Officers Association trying to run show in the city council. They were not happy with her. They launched a recall drive to get her out of office because essentially they could not force her to bend to their will. She was like, no, I'm not doing this. This isn't aligned with my values. You can do whatever you want, but I will fight this recall. They ended up forcing this recall to a special election last November. Basically, this was the only thing on the ballot, so they were able to get signatures, force this onto the ballot in last November. We were able to beat back this recall. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of volunteer power, so thank you to everybody who attended and joined and helped out there. But we are seeing this become a playbook for corporate forces and right-wing forces teaming up against our progressive champions. So unfortunately, there will be more of these throughout the years that we'll be fighting until we get some really strong structural recall reform. But until then, we will always be there to fight for our folks. And on the more positive side of things, we also like supporting and uplifting what our candidates, when they become elected officials, are doing. So we held, I don't even know how many we've held at this point, but we've held, some of the two pictured here are with Merced City Council member Fu Zhang, and then Redwood City Vice Mayor at the time, Lisette Espinoza-Garnica, on issues relevant to their city. So she was in Redwood City, he was in Merced. And we just wanted to uplift the stuff that they were working on. It's always great to see what our candidates, once they get into office, are doing, and any extra signal boosting that we can do to help get their message out is always a plus for us. We also like to host socials. Election season kind of took our priority for a bit, but socials are an opportunity for us to just eat, drink, have fun, play games with one another. We like to do these in person throughout the state. So if there's any coming up in your area, please be sure to check those out. Again, no cost associated with this. All we ask you to do is show up and have a good time. These are always fun events that we have, and hopefully we get some more going throughout the state soon. The next, it says members meeting. It's not just exclusive to members, but the next meeting that we are having, we like to have these every third Monday of the month. So this is our next one coming up is about CalCare. So this is the Universal Single Payer Healthcare Bill reintroduced by Assemblymember Ash Kalra. It will go through the whole legislative process. Again, as you saw, we don't have all the votes we need to pass legislation, so it will require everyone on the ground lobbying efforts to ensure that this gets passed. This is already available on, I think I did that right, but events should show up. Cool. You should be able to see this on our Mobilize page. This is 2 Mondays from now, so 2 weeks from now, actually, we will be having our next meeting on CalCare. We'll be having a speaker from CNA join us about what we can do to help get this passed, because this is an issue that here in California, where we have a majority of Democratic votes, should be able to pass this. So hopefully we are able to see what we can do and continue the fight from there. Next, we are having our first ever California WFP convention. This is coming off the heels of National having their first convention last year. We were like, hey, National did it. California can do it too. So this is our very first California only WFP convention. I think I did this correctly, but the application link for this, cool. It is there. The registration is live. We are extending the early bird registration another 2 weeks. So you have another 2 weeks till April 15th to sign up for this. If you have questions, I believe there is a contact information on that. If not, you can reach out to me and I'll connect you with whoever you need to get in contact with. Registration is open for folks. Again, the early bird registration is going through April 15th. If you wait till after that, price goes up a little bit. So please make sure you get on that. This is not just for anyone here. You can share this with other folks. We encourage anyone who is able to attend. Scholarships are available if you are in need of it. So don't think that there's a cost associated. You can't attend. We want, again, to make this accessible to folks. And if folks have questions, of course, just please let me know. Some other work that we do, we also were focusing a lot on the ceasefire stuff as it was going through the Senate and the House of Representatives, focusing on getting congressional members to sign on to the ceasefire letter or to stop the Senate from sending more aid of weaponry to Israel amidst the bombings and continued bombing. We are going to have another one of these this month, so please keep an eye out for that. We don't have a date yet set, but it'll also show up on our Mobilize page once that is up and ready for folks. I always like to give a quick overview of who is on our team. Jane Kim is our California State Director, for those of you who know of her from San Francisco or the Bay Area. She is a former Board of Supervisors and school board trustee. I don't know if they're trustees up there. In San Francisco, she was also the political director for the Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign in California. Jorge Contreras is, I need to change his title because he is now the deputy state director. He came from Texas and was one of the first ones on the ground in California to help get us started. We also have Adam Gold, who is the senior affairs strategist Adam's basically in charge of helping out with all the congressional races. Everything like that that has to do with kind of the congressional stuff is in Adam's plate. And then there is all of us, the organizers. You have Alicia Crater, who is in the East Bay and runs that stuff there. She also runs our social media, so anytime you see a good graphic, whether it's this graphic here or anything nice on our social media, know that it is Alicia who is responsible for that. So anytime you see things, say shout out Alicia in any of the comments you see her stuff in. I am based in the South Bay, although I'm the statewide organizer. Again, Aiden Rodriguez Swanson. We have James Coleman, who is in the Peninsula in San Francisco. James is also the mayor of South San Francisco. South San Francisco is its own city. For those of you who do not know, it is its own separate entity from San Francisco, but he is the mayor of South San Francisco. We have Neil Sanapa, who is the organizer for the Central Valley and Central Coast. Sacramento is included in the Central Valley. For those wondering, Lauren Nguyen, who is the organizer for the Orange County and Inland Empire. Hannah Kessel, who is the organizer for Los Angeles County. And then Becca Rose, one of our latest additions, who is the current organizer for San Diego and our comms manager as well. If you want to get in touch with any of these folks, let me see if I remembered what my thing was. But our link tree should have access to everybody's. If you want to meet with folks, this is a great opportunity to meet with them. You can email us. You can talk to us wherever. You can also reach out to us on Discord. If you're not familiar with what Discord is, it's basically a cooler version of Slack. This is our California WFP Discord, where we give updates, we share things that's going on, we have different events on there, sometimes we have movie nights, but that's an easier way to sometimes get a hold of folks when you don't just want to send an email. It's a very casual space, so don't think like, oh, I don't know how to use it, I'm brand new to this. No one's going to get on you for not knowing how to use these things right now. It's a learning space. With that, I've dropped a lot of links in the chat, but I always like to say at the end, we are a grassroots-led organization. We don't have the big funders of the Democrat Party. We are not cozying up to those folks. So if folks ever want to become a member of California WFP, please become a member by joining the Act Blue. Any recurring donation allows you to become a member. You can become a member rep. You have access to a lot of other things that we're rolling out this year as well. This basically allows us to fund the operations that we are continuing to do to elect these folks at every level in office. I'm going to bring it back to this slide for folks. But essentially, this is everything I wanted to cover for this evening. If folks have additional questions, please feel free to let me know. Whether you just want to say hi, whatever you need to do, you have questions about anything I covered or I didn't cover, everything is open for things. There's no silly questions, there's no dumb questions. I hope everyone found this informative and useful. I know I always like to see new names. Of course, thank you. I'm also going to drop my email in the chat just in case folks want to see it. That is my email. You can just say hi, whatever. I'm also on Discord. You can ping me there. You can say hi wherever, but if you have questions about stuff, if you have questions about anything I shared, feel free to let me know. I mean, this information is available for everybody. This video is also going to be staying on YouTube. So if you know of folks who might be interested in this stuff and don't want to wait till the next welcome gathering on May 1st or whatever the first Monday of May is, you can always just share them this YouTube video with introduction. Granted, it won't be the same kind of interaction stuff, but just know that it is always an option and available to people. If folks don't have any questions, I'm just going to hang out here for a little bit. If folks have lingering questions, don't feel like you need to stay on for any longer. Thank you again for joining us. This is the April 1st April Fool's welcome gathering. We are already in April of 2024. Time is flying. But thank you again to everyone who joined. Thanks for those who hopped in the chat. It's always nice to see new faces or new names, I should say. Don't think you are your profile picture, but excited to continue to build with folks. With that, thank you, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay dry for those of you in rainy areas, and hopefully you get some sunshine soon. Take care, everybody.